She survived the fire that was meant to kill her and became something they could never destroy. Tonight's story isn't about a woman who was saved. It's about a woman who refused to die when everyone, her mate, her pack, her entire world, decided she was worthless. Kayla Thorne was cast into a wasteland to burn alive, labeled barren and broken. But what they didn't know was that her fire was never a curse. It was a warning. And when she rose from the ashes, she didn't come back begging for mercy. She came back as something far more dangerous than they ever imagined. Stick around until the end to see how a discarded Luna becomes the mother of legends. And if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's begin. The ceremony was supposed to be private. Kayla Thorne stood in the center of the pack hall, barefoot on cold stone, feeling the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on her, like stones piled on a drowning body. The hall smelled of pine smoke and old blood, the kind that soaked into wood and never came out. Torches lined the walls, their flames flickering in the draft that crept through the gaps in the timber. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, but inside, the silence was worse. Rick's Calder stood across from her, arms crossed, jaw tight. He didn't look at her face. He hadn't looked at her face in weeks. 3 years, he said, voice flat. 3 years and nothing. Kayla's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, to say something that would make him stop looking at her like she was a mistake he'd made in the dark. But the words stuck. You know what that means, Rix continued, addressing the room now, not her. His voice echoed off the rafters. A Luna who can't bear heirs is no Luna at all. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some of the younger wolves shifted uncomfortably. The older ones, the ones who remembered harsher times, nodded in agreement. Kayla's hands trembled at her sides. She curled them into fists, nails biting into her palms. The heat inside her chest flared, that strange burning sensation that had been growing stronger over the past year. It felt like something living beneath her ribs, coiled and waiting. I didn't, she started, but Rix cut her off. You didn't what? He finally looked at her then, and the coldness in his eyes was worse than anger. It was indifference. You didn't fail. You didn't waste my time. You didn't make me look weak in front of the other packs. Rix, please, enough. He turned to the pack elder, a gray-haired woman named Mirva, who stood beside the ceremonial fire. She held a ceremonial blade, its edge dull with age, but still sharp enough to cut. Mirva's expression was unreadable, but Kayla saw the slight downward twitch of her mouth. Pity, maybe. Or disappointment. The bond must be severed, Mirva said, her voice carrying the weight of ritual. As is the law when a mate proves insufficient. Insufficient. The word landed like a slap. Kayla's vision blurred. Not from tears, she wouldn't give them that, but from the heat. It was rising again, creeping up her spine, spreading through her veins like molten iron. Her skin prickled. Her breath came short and shallow. Do it, Rick said. Mirva stepped forward, raising the blade. But before she could speak the words that would sever the bond, Rix held up a hand. No, he said, not here. Confusion flickered across Mirva's face. Alpha? Rix's jaw tightened. She's not worth the ceremony. Take her to the expanse. Let the wasteland have her. A collective intake of breath swept through the hall. The ashen expanse. No one survived the expanse. It was a stretch of barren, sun-scorched land beyond the northern ridge, where nothing grew and nothing lived. The ground itself was cracked and gray, littered with bones from those foolish enough or desperate enough to try crossing it. The pack used it as a dumping ground for traitors and cowards. And now, apparently, for broken Lunas. Kayla's chest constricted. You can't. I can, Rick said coldly. And I am. 2 wolves stepped forward, Garrett and Civ, both enforcers she'd once trusted. Garrett wouldn't meet her eyes. Civ looked like he was carved from stone. Take her, Rix ordered, and make sure she doesn't come back. Garrett hesitated. Alpha, the bond, if we don't sever it properly. I'll deal with it, Rick snapped. Just get her out of my sight. They grabbed her by the arms, rough but not brutal. Kayla didn't fight. What was the point? She could feel the bond between them, thin and frayed, but still there, pulling taut like a rope about to snap. Rix must have felt it too because he flinched just slightly before turning his back on her. That was the last thing she saw before they dragged her out of the hall. The journey to the Expanse took 2 days. They traveled in silence, stopping only when necessary. Garrett tried to offer her water once, but Civ slapped the canteen out of his hand. "She's dead anyway," Civ muttered. "Don't waste it." Kayla didn't argue. She barely had the strength. The heat inside her was growing worse, burning hotter with every mile. Her skin felt feverish, her muscles ached, and her vision swam in and out of focus. She stumbled more than once, and each time Garrett caught her before she fell. "Sorry," he mumbled, though she wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. On the second night, they made camp at the edge of the ridge. Below them, the Expanse stretched out like a scar across the earth, gray, lifeless, endless. The wind carried no scent, no sound, just emptiness. Garrett built a small fire while Civ stood watch. Kayla sat with her back against a rock, staring at the flames. They didn't warm her. Nothing did anymore, except the fire inside, and that was burning her alive from the inside out. "You should eat," Garrett said quietly, holding out a strip of dried meat. Kayla shook her head. "You need your strength. For what?" Her voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. "To die slower?" Garrett flinched. He set the meat down beside her and turned away. Civ snorted from his post. "She's finally starting to get it." "Shut up, Civ," Garrett muttered. "Why? It's the truth. She's barren. Useless. Rix was right to toss her." Kayla closed her eyes. The words should have hurt, but they didn't. She was too tired, too burned out. All she felt was the fire, growing hotter, spreading wider, filling every empty space inside her. When dawn broke, they marched her down into the Expanse. The ground was cracked and hard beneath her feet, radiating heat even though the sun had barely risen. The air shimmered, distorting the horizon. Kayla's legs shook with every step, but she forced herself forward. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of carrying her. They stopped about a mile in. "This is far enough," Civ said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Any further, and we'll be dead too." Garrett looked at Kayla, something almost like regret flickering in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said again. Then they turned and left. Kayla stood there, alone, watching their figures shrink into the distance until they disappeared entirely. She waited until she couldn't hear their footsteps anymore. Then she sank to her knees. The sun climbed higher. The heat pressed down on her like a physical weight, crushing the air from her lungs. Her vision darkened at the edges. She could feel her heartbeat slowing, each thud weaker than the last. This was it then. This was how it ended. She thought about Rix, about the way he used to look at her, back when they were young and the bond was new. She thought about the pack, the life she'd tried so hard to build, the children she'd wanted but never had. And then she thought about the fire that had been burning inside her for so long, the fire no one understood, the fire they all feared. What if it wasn't killing her? What if it was trying to become something? The thought was absurd, desperate. But as the darkness closed in, Kayla reached for it anyway. She reached for the fire, the heat, the thing inside her that wouldn't die no matter how hard the world tried to snuff it out. And the fire reached back. It surged through her, hotter than the sun, brighter than any flame. Her body convulsed, her back arching off the ground. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out, only light, pouring from her throat, her eyes, her skin. The ground beneath her cracked, the sky above her darkened, and something vast and ancient turned its gaze toward her. When Kayla opened her eyes, the sun was gone. No, not gone. Eclipsed. A shadow stretched across the Expanse, massive and impossible. She blinked, trying to clear her vision, and slowly the shadow took shape. Wings. Enormous wings, each one the size of a ship's sail, blocking out the sky. Scales like polished obsidian caught the faint light, gleaming dark red and gold at the edges. A body coiled and powerful, radiating heat that made even the Expanse seem cold by comparison. A dragon. Kayla's breath caught. It descended slowly, deliberately, each beat of its wings sending gusts of scorching air across the cracked earth. When it landed, the ground shook. Dust rose in clouds, and Kayla felt the vibration in her bones. The creature lowered its head, bringing one massive eye level with her. The eye was molten gold, flecked with embers. and it studied her with an intelligence that was unmistakably, terrifyingly aware. Kayla should have been afraid. She should have run, screamed, done anything, but all she felt was the fire inside her, rising to meet the heat radiating from the dragon, and for the first time in her life, it didn't hurt. It felt like recognition. The dragon's eye narrowed slightly, as if considering her. Then, in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder, it spoke. Not in words, not exactly, but Kayla understood it all the same. "You are not broken." The words sank into her chest, settling somewhere deep. "You were never theirs to cast aside." The dragon shifted, and the ground trembled again. Slowly, impossibly, its form began to change. Scales receded, wings folded inward, and the massive body contracted, reshaping itself until what stood before her was no longer a dragon, but a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, skin the color of burnished bronze, marked with faint scars that looked like they'd been carved by claws. His hair was black, shot through with streaks of dark red, and his eyes, those eyes, still burned with molten gold. He crouched down in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "You're dying," he said. His voice was rough, edged with smoke. Kayla tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She managed a weak nod. The man, the dragon, tilted his head, studying her the way a predator studies prey. But there was no malice in his gaze, only curiosity, and something else, something almost like satisfaction. "They threw you away," he said. It wasn't a question. Kayla nodded again. "Because they thought you were barren." Another nod. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fools." He reached out, and Kayla flinched instinctively. But he didn't strike her. Instead, he placed one hand, large, warm, impossibly gentle, against her chest, right over her heart. The fire inside her surged. Kayla gasped, her back arching, but the man held her steady. The heat didn't burn. It didn't consume. Instead, it spread, filling every corner of her body, driving out the cold, the pain, the exhaustion. "You were never meant for wolves," the man said quietly. "Your fire is too strong, too old. They couldn't hold it." Kayla's vision cleared. Her heartbeat steadied. She drew in a full breath for the first time in days. "What?" Her voice cracked. "What are you?" The man smiled then, a sharp, dangerous thing. "Kalion Varric, Dragon King of the Ashbourne Peaks." He stood, pulling her up with him as if she weighed nothing. "And you, little wolf, are coming with me, Olch." Kayla didn't remember much of the journey. One moment she was standing in the expanse, Kalion's hand wrapped around her wrist. The next, the world dissolved into heat and wind, and the rush of air as they shot upward. She might have screamed. She wasn't sure. Everything was a blur of red and gold and black. When the world solidified again, she was lying on stone, cool stone, smooth. Not the cracked, burning ground of the expanse, but something carved and shaped by hands or claws. She blinked, trying to focus, and slowly her surroundings came into view. A cave. No, not a cave. A hall. The ceiling arched high overhead, supported by columns of natural rock shot through with veins of something that glowed faintly red, like embers buried in coal. The walls were smooth, almost polished, and the floor beneath her was inlaid with patterns that looked like flames frozen in stone. Warmth radiated from everywhere, but it wasn't oppressive. It was comfortable, like being wrapped in a blanket on a cold night. Kayla sat up slowly, her head spinning. Her body still ached, but the burning inside her had dulled to a low simmer. She could breathe, she could think. "Easy." She turned. Kalion stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching her with that same unreadable expression. He'd draped something over her, a cloak, heavy and lined with dark fur. She pulled it tighter around herself. "Where am I?" "My home," Kalion said simply. "The Ashbourne Peaks." Kayla looked around again, taking in the grandeur of the hall. "This is a mountain?" "Several mountains, actually, hollowed out over centuries." He gestured vaguely toward the far end of the hall, where an archway opened onto darkness. "This is just the entrance." Kayla's mind struggled to process it. Dragons. Mountains. A king who could shift between forms. It was too much, too fast. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked. Kalion tilted his head, considering her. "Because you were dying, and because I was curious." "Curious about what?" "About you." He stepped closer, and Kayla fought the urge to back away. "Your fire. I felt it from miles away. Strong, ancient, the kind of fire that doesn't belong in a wolf." "I don't understand." "You will." Kalian crouched down so they were eye level. His gaze was intense, burning. "Tell me, Kayla Thorne, did they ever wonder why you burned so hot? Why your body rejected every attempt to bear their children?" Kayla's throat tightened. "They said I was broken." Kalion's expression darkened. "They were idiots." He stood again, pacing toward the archway. "You weren't broken. You were incompatible. Wolf bloodlines are weak, diluted. Your fire is too pure, too powerful. It would have incinerated any wolf-born child before it could form." Kayla stared at him, the words sinking in slowly. "So, it was never me?" "No." Kalian glanced back at her. "It was them. They were too small to hold what you are." "And what am I?" Kalian smiled, sharp and knowing. "Something far more interesting than a wolf." The days that followed blurred together. Kalian didn't push her. He gave her space, food, water, and time to heal. The mountain was vast, far larger than she'd imagined. Halls branched into chambers, chambers into courtyards open to the sky. Everywhere she looked, there was evidence of a civilization that had existed long before wolves ever walked the earth. And everywhere there was heat. Not the suffocating, deadly heat of the expanse, but a living warmth that seemed to pulse through the stone itself. Kayla found herself drawn to it, standing for hours in the courtyards where the sun poured down through openings in the rock, letting the heat soak into her skin. It didn't hurt anymore. For the first time in years, the fire inside her felt right. Kalion watched her often. She'd catch him standing in doorways, arms crossed, eyes tracking her movements. He never said much, but his presence was constant, grounding. One evening, as she stood in one of the courtyards watching the sunset, he approached. "Feeling better?" he asked. Kayla nodded. "I don't feel like I'm dying anymore." "Good." He stood beside her, gazing out at the horizon. "Your body is adjusting. The fire is settling." "Why does it feel different here?" "Because here, you're not fighting it." Kalion glanced at her. "You spent years trying to suppress it, trying to make yourself smaller so you'd fit into their world. Here, you don't have to." Kayla considered that. "And what if I don't want to go back?" Kalion's mouth curved into a faint smile. "Then don't." Silence settled between them, comfortable and warm. Then suddenly Kayla felt it. A pull. Sharp and cold, cutting through the warmth like a blade. She gasped, her hand flying to her chest. The bond. The mate bond she'd thought was severed, or at least dormant. It flared to life, and with it came Rix's voice, distant but clear. "Kayla." She staggered, and Kalion was there instantly, his hand on her arm. "What is it?" "The bond," she whispered. He's in my head." Kalion's eyes flashed gold. "Your mate?" "Former mate." Kayla's jaw tightened. "He never severed it properly." "Kayla!" Rix's voice came again, sharper this time. "Where are you?" "Can you block him?" Kalion asked. "I don't know how—" "Answer me." Pain lanced through her skull. Kayla cried out, dropping to her knees. Kalion knelt beside her, his hand moving to her temple. "Breathe," he said quietly. "Focus on the fire. Let it burn him out." Kayla tried, but Rix's voice was relentless, clawing at the edges of her mind. "You think you can hide from me? You're mine. You'll always be mine." "No," Kayla whispered. "Come back. Now. No." And then something inside her snapped. The fire surged, hotter and brighter than it had ever been. Kayla felt it tear through the bond like a blade through silk, severing the connection in one brutal, final cut. Rix's voice vanished. The silence that followed was deafening. Kayla slumped forward, gasping, and Kalian caught her before she hit the ground. "You did it," he said, a note of approval in his voice. "You severed it yourself." Kayla looked up at him, her vision still swimming. Is he gone? Completely. Relief flooded through her, so intense it left her shaking. She'd done it. She'd cut him out. For the first time in 3 years, she was free. Kalion helped her to her feet, steadying her until she could stand on her own. That took strength, he said quietly. More than most wolves have. Kayla managed a weak smile. I'm not most wolves. Kalion's eyes gleamed. No, he agreed. You're not. And for the first time since she'd been thrown into the expanse, Kayla believed it. The bond was gone, but the ghost of it lingered. Kayla woke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, her hand clutched to her chest where the connection used to pulse. The silence in her mind was unnerving. For 3 years, Rix had been there, a constant presence, sometimes warm, often cold, always there. Now there was nothing, just emptiness and the crackling heat of her own fire. She sat up, the fur cloak sliding off her shoulders. The chamber Kalion had given her was carved from the mountain itself, walls smooth and dark, lit by veins of glowing emberstone that ran through the rock like arteries. The bed was large, piled with furs and woven blankets that smelled faintly of smoke and cedar. Comfortable, but foreign. Everything here was foreign. Kayla pulled on the simple tunic and pants Kalion had left for her, dark, sturdy fabric that didn't scratch against her still sensitive skin, and stepped out into the corridor. The mountain was quiet at night, but not silent. She could hear the low rumble of something deep below, like a heartbeat made of stone and fire. Air moved through the halls in gentle currents, warm and alive. She followed it, letting her feet carry her without thinking until she found herself in the courtyard again. The sky above was scattered with stars, clearer and brighter than she'd ever seen them through the forest canopy back home. The moon hung low and full, casting silver light across the stone. Can't sleep? Kayla turned. Kalion stood in the archway, bare-chested, his skin gleaming faintly in the moonlight. The scars on his torso were more visible now, long, deliberate marks that looked like they'd been made by claws. His hair was loose, falling past his shoulders, and his eyes still glowed faintly gold even in the dark. I keep expecting to hear him, Kayla admitted. In my head, even though I know he's not there anymore. Kalion stepped into the courtyard, moving with the kind of controlled grace that came from a body that knew exactly what it was capable of. Phantom bonds. They'll fade in time. How long? Depends on how deep it went. He stopped a few feet away, studying her. You were bonded for 3 years. It might take weeks, maybe months. Kayla wrapped her arms around herself. Great. You regret severing it? No. The answer came instantly, fierce. I just wish I'd done it sooner. Kalion's mouth curved into something that might have been approval. Good. They stood in silence for a moment, the night air moving around them. Why are you helping me? Kayla asked suddenly. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Kalion tilted his head, considering. No, I don't. Then why? Because I wanted to. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I saw something burning in the wasteland. I went to look. I found you, and I decided you were worth keeping alive. That's it? Just curiosity? Mostly. Kalion's gaze sharpened. And because I recognized what you are. Which is? Someone who's been trying to fit into a shape that was never meant for them. He stepped closer, and Kayla resisted the urge to back away. You spent 3 years burning yourself out trying to be what they wanted. A docile Luna, a broodmare, a decoration. Kayla flinched at the words, but she didn't deny them. And when your body refused, Kalion continued, they called you broken, threw you away. Because it was easier to discard you than to admit they were wrong. They weren't wrong, Kayla said quietly. I couldn't give them what they needed. No, you couldn't give them what they wanted. There's a difference. Kalion's voice dropped, rough and low. They needed heirs to keep their bloodline strong. You couldn't provide that because your fire would have burned any wolf-born child to ash before it could form. That's not failure. That's incompatibility. Kayla looked up at him, her chest tight. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept that I'll never eat. You'll never have wolf children, Kalion interrupted. That doesn't mean you'll never have children at all. The words hung in the air between them. Kayla's breath caught. What are you saying? Kalion held her gaze, unflinching. I'm saying your fire isn't a curse. It's a filter. It burns out what's too weak to survive. Wolves are too weak, but something stronger. He trailed off, letting the implication settle. Kayla's heart hammered in her chest. You mean... I mean you were never meant for them. Kalion's eyes burned brighter. You were meant for something that could match your fire, something that wouldn't break under the heat. The silence that followed was deafening. Kayla didn't know what to say. Didn't know what to think. The idea was insane. Impossible. And yet, standing here in the warmth of the mountain, feeling the fire inside her settle and hum in a way it never had before, it didn't feel impossible. It felt inevitable. I don't even know if I want that anymore, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. After everything? Then don't decide now. Kalion stepped back, giving her space. Heal first. Get your strength back. Figure out who you are without them hanging over you. Kayla nodded slowly. And then? Then you decide what you want. Kalion turned toward the archway. But whatever you choose, it'll be yours, not theirs, not mine. Yours. He disappeared into the shadows, leaving Kayla alone under the stars. She stood there for a long time, feeling the fire inside her burn steady and strong, and for the first time in 3 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't broken after all. The next morning, Kalion took her deeper into the mountain. If you're going to stay here, you need to understand where you are, he said, leading her down a spiral staircase carved into the rock. The steps were worn smooth by centuries of use, and the walls glowed faintly with that same emberstone light. How old is this place? Kayla asked, running her hand along the wall. The stone was warm under her palm, old enough that no one remembers who built it. Kalion's voice echoed in the narrow passage. My kind have been here for generations, but we didn't carve these halls. We inherited them. They descended for what felt like hours, though Kayla suspected it was only minutes. Time felt strange here, stretched and compressed all at once. Finally, the staircase opened into a cavern so vast that Kayla couldn't see the far wall. The ceiling arched high overhead, held up by natural pillars of stone that glowed red and gold from within. The floor was smooth, polished to a mirror shine, and in the center of the cavern sat a pool of molten rock, bubbling and hissing, radiating heat that made even Kayla's fire-touched skin prickle. This is the heart of the mountain, Kalion said, where the fire is strongest. Kayla stared at the pool, mesmerized. The molten stone moved like a living thing, slow and deliberate, coiling and folding in on itself. It's beautiful. It's dangerous. Kalion stopped at the edge of the pool, close enough that the heat distorted the air around him. One wrong step and you're ash. But for my kind, it's home. He knelt down, pressing his palm flat against the stone floor. Kayla watched as the glow beneath his hand brightened, spreading outward in veins that connected to the pool. The molten rock responded, swirling faster, brighter. You're controlling it, Kayla said. Guiding it, Kalion corrected. The fire has its own will. I just suggest direction. He stood, brushing ash from his hand. Kayla blinked. What? Put your hand on the stone, feel the fire beneath it. I don't know how... You've been doing it your whole life, Kalion said. You just didn't know what it was. Stop thinking. Just feel. Kayla hesitated, then knelt down and pressed her palm against the stone. The heat hit her instantly, rushing up her arm and into her chest. But it didn't burn. It welcomed her. She could feel the fire beneath the surface, vast and ancient and alive, pulsing in rhythm with her own heartbeat. And then, impossibly, it listened. The glow beneath her hand brightened, spreading outward just like it had for Kalion. The molten pool shifted, responding to her touch, swirling in patterns that felt almost like recognition. Kayla gasped, pulling her hand back. The glow faded instantly. I felt it, she whispered. I felt it know me. Kalion crouched beside her, his expression unreadable. Because it does. The fire recognizes its own. But I'm not... She stopped, the words dying in her throat. Not what? Kalion asked quietly. Not a dragon? No. But you're not just a wolf either. You're something in between. Something the fire can work with. Kayla stared at the pool, her mind racing. How is that possible? I don't know, Kalian admitted, but I intend to find out. Dun dun dun. Over the following days, Kyla began to settle into a rhythm. Kalian was a strange host, distant but attentive, giving her space while somehow always knowing when she needed help. He taught her how to navigate the mountain, how to read the veins of emberstone to find her way, how to distinguish between the halls that were safe and the ones that weren't. Some chambers are too hot even for dragons, he warned, pointing to a corridor that glowed brighter than the others. The fire is unstable there. Go in and you won't come out. Kayla made a mental note to avoid that hallway. She also met others. Not many. Kellyan's people were few and far between, scattered throughout the peaks, but enough to understand that she was an anomaly. A wolf in a dragon's den. They stared at her when they thought she wasn't looking, whispered when she passed. Some were curious. Others were hostile. One afternoon, as she was exploring the upper terraces, she encountered a woman with copper-red hair and scales that shimmered along her arms like armor. "You're the wolf," the woman said flatly. Kayla stopped. "I am." The woman circled her slowly, eyes narrowed. "You don't smell like prey." "Should I?" "Most wolves do. Weak, fragile, easy to break." The woman stopped in front of her, tilting her head. "You smell like smoke, like you've been standing too close to the fire." "Maybe I have." The woman's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Kalian must see something in you. He doesn't usually waste time on strays." "I'm not a stray." "No?" The woman leaned in, close enough that Kayla could see the faint glow in her eyes. "Then what are you?" Kayla met her gaze, refusing to back down. "I'm still figuring that out." The woman stared at her for a long moment, then laughed, a sharp barking sound. "You've got spine, at least. That's more than most." She turned and walked away, calling over her shoulder, "Name's Ceres. Try not to die before you figure yourself out." Kayla watched her go, unsure whether she'd just made a friend or an enemy. That night, the nightmare started. Kayla woke gasping, the remnants of Rix's voice still echoing in her ears. Except it wasn't a phantom bond this time. It was a memory, his face twisted in disgust, his words cutting deeper than any blade. Worthless, broken, a waste. She sat up, shaking, her skin slick with sweat. The fire inside her churned, unstable, feeding on the fear and anger she was trying so hard to suppress. A knock at the door made her jump. "Kayla." Kalion's voice, low and steady. She hesitated, then called out, "Come in." The door opened and Kalion stepped inside, still dressed in the same dark pants and loose shirt he'd been wearing earlier. He looked at her, taking in the state of her, tangled hair, trembling hands, the wild look in her eyes, and closed the door behind him. "Nightmare?" he asked. Kayla nodded, not trusting her voice. Kalion crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, close but not touching. "What did you see?" "Him." The word came out bitter. "Rix, the things he said. The way he looked at me. He's not here." "I know that." Kayla's hands clenched into fists. "But it doesn't stop the memory." Kalion was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He's still in your head because you let him be." Kayla's head snapped up. "Excuse me? You severed the bond. You cut him out. But you're still holding on to the pain he caused." Kalion's gaze was steady, unflinching. "You're letting him haunt you." "I'm not." "You are." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "You're carrying his words like they're truth, like you still believe them." Kayla's throat tightened. "What if they are true? They're not." "You don't know that." "I do." Kalion reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and firm. "Because I've seen what you are. I've felt your fire. And I know that anyone who called you broken was either blind or a coward too afraid to admit they couldn't handle you." Kayla stared at him, her chest tight, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. "He threw you away because he was weak," Kalion continued, his voice rough but certain. "Not because you were." The words hit her like a physical blow, cracking something open inside her chest. The tears came then, hot and furious, and she didn't stop them. Kalion pulled her against him, one hand in her hair, the other wrapped around her back. She buried her face in his shoulder and let herself break, just for a moment, feeling the heat of him surrounding her like a shield. When the tears finally stopped, she pulled back, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Sorry," she muttered. "Don't be." Kalion brushed a strand of hair out of her face, his touch surprisingly gentle. "You needed it." Kayla managed a weak laugh. "I'm a mess." "You're healing." Kalion stood, but his hand lingered on her shoulder for a moment. "It's not pretty, but it's necessary." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Get some rest. Tomorrow I'm taking you to the lower peaks. There's someone you need to meet." "Who?" Kalion's mouth curved into a faint smile. "Someone who will understand what you're going through better than I ever could." And with that, he left, closing the door softly behind him. Kayla lay back down, the fire inside her settling into something steadier, and for the first time since the nightmares started, she slept without dreaming. The lower peaks were colder than the heart of the mountain, but still warmer than anywhere Kayla had lived before. Kalion led her along a narrow path carved into the cliffside, the drop on one side steep enough to make her stomach turn. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of pine and ash. "Where are we going?" Kayla asked, gripping the rock wall for balance. "To see Mira," Kalion said. "She lives on the edge of our territory, prefers solitude." "Why do I need to meet her?" "Because she's like you." Kayla blinked. "What?" "Not a wolf," Kalion clarified, "but not a dragon either. Something in between." Before Kayla could ask more, the path opened into a small plateau. A cottage sat at the edge, built from stone and timber, smoke rising from the chimney. It looked almost normal, domestic even, except for the faint glow coming from the windows. Kalion knocked once, then pushed the door open without waiting for an answer. Inside, the cottage was warm and cluttered. Shelves lined the walls, packed with books, jars of dried herbs, and strange instruments Kayla didn't recognize. A fire crackled in the hearth, and sitting beside it was a woman who looked to be in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that glowed faintly amber. She looked up as they entered, her gaze landing on Kayla with unnerving intensity. "So," the woman said, setting down the book she'd been reading, "you brought her." "I did." Kalion stepped aside, gesturing for Kayla to come forward. "Kayla, this is Mira." "Mira." "Kayla." Mira stood, moving with a grace that belied her age. She circled Kayla slowly, the same way Saris had, but her gaze was sharper, more analytical. "Wolf-born," Mira murmured, "but touched by fire. Interesting." "She was rejected by her pack," Kalion said. "Called barren." Mira snorted. "Of course they did. Idiots." She stopped in front of Kayla, tilting her head. "Let me see your hands." Kayla hesitated, then held them out. Mira took them, turning them over, studying the lines and scars. Then she pressed her thumbs against Kayla's wrists, right over her pulse points. Heat flared between them. Not painful, but startling. Mira's eyes widened. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, you poor thing." "What?" Kayla asked, uneasy. Mira released her hands and stepped back, her expression a mix of pity and awe. "You're not barren. You're dormant." "What does that mean?" "It means your body has been waiting," Mira said. "Waiting for the right match, the right fire." She glanced at Kalion, something knowing in her gaze. "Wolf fire isn't strong enough. It never was. But dragon fire." She trailed off, and the implication hung heavy in the air. Kayla's heart pounded. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying you could bear children," Mira interrupted. "Just not with wolves. Your body won't accept them. It'll reject anything that doesn't match your fire." Kayla felt the floor tilt beneath her. "But I'm not. I can't." "You can," Mira said firmly. "If the fire is right." Kalion was silent, his expression unreadable. Kayla looked between them, her mind spinning. "This is insane." "It's rare," Mira corrected, "but not impossible. I've seen it before. Once." Her gaze softened. "My mother was like you. Wolf-born, fire-touched. She bonded with a dragon, and she had me." Kayla stared at her. "You're half," Mira finished. "Half wolf, half dragon. Neither and both." She smiled faintly. "It's not an easy life, but it's mine." Kayla sank into the nearest chair, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. Everything she'd believed about herself, everything Rix and the pack had drilled into her, was a lie. She wasn't broken. She was just waiting. Mira knelt in front of her, taking her hands again. Listen to me. What they did to you was cruel and wrong, but it doesn't define you. You get to choose what happens next. Kayla met her gaze, seeing the understanding there, the shared pain of rejection and rebirth. What if I make the wrong choice? Kayla whispered. Mira smiled. Then you make another one. That's the beauty of it. You're free now. The only person you answer to is yourself. The walk back to the heart of the mountain was quiet. Kalion didn't push her to talk, and Kayla was grateful. Her mind was too full, too loud with possibilities and fears, and the slow, creeping hope she was afraid to name. When they reached the courtyard, Kalion finally spoke. You don't have to decide anything now, he said. Mira's right. You have time. Kayla nodded, staring up at the stars. Thank you for taking me to her. She needed to meet you as much as you needed to meet her. Kalion paused. And I needed you to know the truth. Why? He looked at her then, his golden eyes burning in the dark. Because I don't want you here out of desperation. I want you here because you choose to be. Kayla's breath caught. Before she could respond, a sharp, searing pain lanced through her chest. She cried out, stumbling, and Kalion caught her. What is it? He demanded. Kayla gasped, her hand flying to her heart. The bond? No, not the bond. Something else, something worse. A presence, cold and furious, clawing at the edges of her mind. Rick's. But how? She'd severed the bond. She'd burned it out completely. Unless he's forcing it, Kayla gasped. He's trying to rebuild it. Kalion's expression darkened. That's not possible. He's doing it anyway. Kayla's vision swam. She could feel Rick's rage, his obsession, his refusal to let her go. He won't stop. He'll keep trying until... She didn't finish. The pain spiked and the world went black. When Kayla opened her eyes, she was lying on cold stone, staring up at a ceiling she didn't recognize. Her head throbbed, and her chest felt like someone had driven a stake through it. She tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Don't move. Mira's voice, sharp and commanding. Kayla turned her head slowly. The older woman knelt beside her, hands pressed against Kayla's temples, her eyes glowing bright amber. The heat radiating from her palms was intense, almost painful. What happened? Kayla croaked. Your former mate is an idiot, Mira said tersely, and a dangerous one. Kalion stood nearby, arms crossed, his expression darker than Kayla had ever seen it. He's trying to force a new bond, without your consent. Kayla's stomach turned. That's not possible. It shouldn't be, Mira corrected. But if he's desperate enough, ruthless enough, he can try to rebuild the pathways. It won't be clean, it won't be stable, but it'll hurt like hell and give him access to your mind. Can you stop it? Mira's jaw tightened. I'm trying, but he's persistent. Every time I burn out a connection, he starts building another. Kayla felt the tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she forced them back. How long can he keep doing this? As long as he wants, Mira said grimly, or until one of you dies. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Kalion moved closer, his presence a wall of heat and barely controlled fury. There's another way. Mira glanced up at him. You're not suggesting I am. That's insane. She's barely stable as it is. She'll be less stable if he keeps clawing his way into her head. Kalion's eyes flashed gold. You know I'm right. Mira stared at him for a long moment, then cursed under her breath. She looked down at Kayla. He wants to replace the bond. Kayla blinked. What? A mate bond is a connection, Kalion said. A pathway between two people. Right now, Rix is trying to rebuild the one you severed. But if there's already another bond in place, a stronger one, he won't be able to force his way in. Understanding hit Kayla like a punch to the gut. You mean a new bond, Kalion finished, with me. Kayla's breath caught. Her mind spun, scrambling to process what he was saying. That's permanent. Yes. And if I say no, then we keep fighting Rix off until he either gives up or kills you trying. Kalion crouched down beside her, his gaze steady and unflinching. I won't force you. This is your choice. But you need to make it now. Kayla looked between him and Mira, her heart hammering. A bond. A real bond, not the broken poison thing she'd had with Rix, but something new. Something she had no reference for, no way of knowing if it would be better or worse. But she did know one thing. She couldn't go back to Rix. She wouldn't. "Do it," she said. Mira's eyes widened. "Kayla!" "Do it," Kayla repeated, her voice stronger. "I'm not giving him another chance to own me." Kalion's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Approval? Maybe. Or respect. He stood and held out his hand. Kayla took it. The moment their palms touched, the fire inside her roared to life. It was nothing like the bond with Rix. That had been a slow build, a gradual intertwining over months. This was instant and overwhelming, like being thrown into a furnace. Heat poured through her, so intense she thought it would burn her alive. She gasped, her grip on Kalion's hand tightening, and he pulled her to her feet. "Look at me," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos in her head. Kayla met his gaze and the world narrowed to just the two of them. She could feel him, not just his presence, but him, his fire, his strength, the vast, ancient weight of his power. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. The bond snapped into place with an audible crack, and Kayla cried out. Then, just as suddenly, the pain was gone. She stood there, breathing hard, Kalion's hand still wrapped around hers. The fire inside her had settled into something steady and strong, no longer fighting itself. And beneath it, she could feel the bond, solid, unbreakable, humming with a life of its own. Mira let out a low whistle. "Well, that's done." Kayla looked down at their joined hands, then up at Kalion. "I can feel you." "I know." His mouth curved into a faint smile. "I can feel you too." It was strange and invasive and oddly comforting all at once. She could sense his emotions, calm, steady, with an undercurrent of satisfaction, and she knew he could sense hers. "What about Rix?" she asked. "Try reaching for him," Mira suggested. Kayla hesitated, then carefully extended her awareness, searching for the cold, familiar presence that had haunted her for days. Nothing. No pain, no voice, no pressure trying to claw its way into her mind, just silence. "He's gone," she whispered. "Locked out," Kalion corrected. "The bond won't let him in. As far as your mind is concerned, I'm the only one with access." Kayla should have been disturbed by that. Instead, all she felt was relief. "Thank you," she said quietly. Kalion's hand tightened around hers for a moment, then released. "Don't thank me yet. This isn't over." "What do you mean?" "Rix won't accept this. When he realizes he can't reach you, he'll come looking." Kalion's expression hardened. "And when he does, it won't be subtle." 2 weeks passed in uneasy peace. Kayla threw herself into learning everything she could about the mountain, about dragons, about the fire that now burned steady and strong inside her. Mira became a constant presence, teaching her how to channel the heat, how to keep it from overwhelming her, how to recognize the difference between her fire and Kaelian's. "It's like learning a new language," Mira explained one afternoon as they sat in the courtyard. "You've been speaking wolf your whole life. Now you're learning dragon. It takes time." Kayla flexed her fingers, watching the faint glow that appeared under her skin when she concentrated. "How long did it take you?" "Years." Mira smiled faintly. "But I was a child. You're starting later, which makes it harder, but you're also more stubborn, which helps." Kayla laughed despite herself. The bond with Kaelion was strange. She could feel him even when he wasn't nearby, a constant, steady presence at the back of her mind. Sometimes it was distracting. Other times it was grounding. She was still getting used to the idea that someone could sense her emotions, her moods, her fears. But Kaelion never pushed, never pried. He gave her space when she needed it and showed up when she didn't ask but needed him anyway. Like the night she woke screaming from a nightmare about the expanse. She'd been back there burning under the sun, alone and dying. But this time, when the shadow descended, it wasn't Kaelion. It was Rix, his face twisted in fury, his hands reaching for her throat. She woke gasping, the sheets tangled around her legs, her skin slick with sweat. The door opened before she could even think about calling out. Kaelion stepped inside, already moving toward her. "I felt it," he said simply. Kayla nodded, not trusting her voice. He sat on the edge of the bed, close but not touching. You're safe. I know. Do you? Kayla met his gaze. I'm trying to. Kalion studied her for a moment, then reached out and took her hand. The bond flared between them, warm and reassuring. He can't reach you. Not here. Not while I'm alive. The certainty in his voice settled something in her chest. What if he tries anyway? Then I'll deal with him. You mean kill him? Kalion's expression didn't change. If necessary. Kayla should have been horrified. Instead, she just felt tired. I don't want you to have to do that because of me. I wouldn't be doing it because of you, Kalion said. I'd be doing it because he's a threat. To you, to my territory, to the peace we've maintained with the wolf packs for decades. He's already crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. Kayla looked down at their joined hands. I didn't want any of this. I know. Kalion's thumb brushed across her knuckles. But you're here anyway. So we deal with it. He stayed until she fell asleep, his presence a steady anchor against the nightmares. The attack came on the 16th day. Kayla was in the lower halls with Mara, practicing her control, when the alarm sounded, a deep, resonant gong that echoed through the entire mountain. Mira's head snapped up. That's the perimeter warning. Kayla's heart jumped into her throat. What does that mean? It means someone's crossed into our territory. Mira was already moving, heading for the stairs. Come on! They ran through the halls, following the sound of voices and footsteps. By the time they reached the main courtyard, it was already crowded with dragons in various states of transformation, some fully scaled, others halfway between human and beast. Kalion stood at the center, fully human, but radiating enough heat that the air around him shimmered. Ceres was beside him, her copper scales gleaming in the light. How many? Kalion demanded. 20, maybe 30, Ceres reported. Wolves. They're moving up the eastern pass. Kayla's blood ran cold. It's him. Kalion's gaze snapped to her. You're sure? I can feel it. And she could. A faint, distant pull, like a fishhook lodged in her chest. The bond might be severed, but the memory of it was still there. He's coming for me. Kalion's expression darkened. He turned to the assembled dragons. No one engages unless I give the order. I want eyes on them, but keep your distance. If they're smart, they'll turn back. And if they're not, Ceres asked, then we remind them why we don't get visitors. The dragons dispersed, moving with terrifying efficiency. Within minutes, the courtyard was empty except for Kalion, Mara, and Kayla. You need to stay inside, Kalion said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Like hell, Kayla shot back. If he's here for me, I'm not hiding. You're not ready. I'm ready enough. Kayla stepped closer, meeting his gaze. I'm not the same person he threw away. I'm not going to cower while you fight my battles. Kalion stared at her, and she felt the bond pulse between them. Frustration, concern, and underneath it all, a grudging pride. Fine, he said finally, but you stay close, and if I tell you to run, you run. Kayla nodded. Mira sighed. You're both insane. They met the wolves at the edge of the plateau, where the mountain path widened into a natural arena. Rick stood at the front, flanked by Garrett and Civ and a dozen other wolves Kayla recognized from the pack. He looked thinner than she remembered, his face gaunt, his eyes wild. But when he saw her, those eyes locked onto her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Kayla, he said, and his voice carried across the distance like a whip crack. There you are. Kayla stood beside Kalion, Mara a few steps behind. She kept her chin up, her shoulders back, refusing to show the fear twisting in her gut. You need to leave, Kalion said, his voice calm but edged with threat. Now. Rix's gaze flicked to him, dismissive. I'm not talking to you, lizard. I'm talking to my mate. She's not your mate, Kalion said flatly. Not anymore. Rix's lip curled. She'll always be mine. That bond doesn't just disappear because she runs away. It does when she severs it herself, Kayla said, stepping forward. I burned you out, Rix. You're nothing to me now. Rix flinched like she'd slapped him. You think you can just walk away after everything I gave you? You gave me nothing, Kayla said, her voice shaking with anger. You took. You used me. And when I couldn't give you what you wanted, you threw me into the wasteland to die. Because you were useless, Rix shouted. 3 years, Kayla. 3 years and nothing. What was I supposed to do? Anything but that, Kayla shot back. You could have released me. Let me go with dignity. But instead you cast me out like garbage. I made a mistake, Rix said, and there was something almost pleading in his voice now. I see that. I was angry. I wasn't thinking clearly. But you're alive. You survived. We can fix this. Kayla laughed, bitter and sharp. Fix this? There's nothing to fix. I don't want you. I don't need you. I never did. Rix's expression twisted. You think he's better? He jerked his chin toward Kalian. You think he cares about you. He's just using you, Kayla, just like I did. No, Kayla said quietly. He's nothing like you. She felt the bond pulse, warm and steady, and knew Kayleon felt it too. Rix's face darkened. You bonded with him. It wasn't a question. Kayla didn't answer. You bonded with him, Rix repeated, his voice rising. You bonded with a dragon while you tried to force your way back into my head, Kayla interrupted. Yeah, I did, because I'd rather bond with someone who respects me than spend one more second tied to you. Rix stared at her, his chest heaving. Then he turned to his wolves. Take her. They moved instantly, faster than Kayla expected, but Kalian was faster. He shifted mid-step, his body exploding into scales and wings and fire. The transformation was so sudden, so complete, that several wolves stumbled back in shock. Kalian landed between Kayla and the advancing pack, his massive form blocking them completely. Heat rolled off him in waves, and when he opened his jaws, smoke curled from between his teeth. Touch her, he rumbled, his voice echoing like thunder, and I'll burn you to ash. The wolves hesitated. Rix snarled. She's mine. I have a right. You have nothing, Kalian said. She severed your bond. She chose me. By every law, every custom, she's no longer yours to claim. I don't care about your laws. Then you're a fool. Rix's control snapped. He shifted, his body twisting into his wolf form, massive, dark-furred, teeth bared. He lunged at Kalian with a speed born of desperation. Kalian met him head-on. The collision shook the ground. Kalian's claws raked across Rix's side, drawing blood. Rix twisted, snapping at Kalian's throat, but the dragon was too large, too strong. He caught Rix by the scruff and flung him across the plateau like a rag doll. Rix hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up snarling. The other wolves moved to help him, but the dragons descended from above. Ceres and half a dozen others, their wings blotting out the sky. The wolves froze. Stand down, Kalian commanded, his voice reverberating across the plateau. Leave now and you live. Stay and you burn. For a moment no one moved, then Garrett shifted back to human form, his hands raised. Alpha, this is suicide. We can't win this. Shut up, Rix growled. He's right, Civ added, also shifting back. We're outnumbered and outmatched. This isn't worth it. She's worth it, Rix roared. No, Kayla said, stepping forward. I'm not. All eyes turned to her. She walked past Kalian, ignoring Mira's hiss of warning, and stopped a few feet from where Rix stood, still in wolf form. I'm not worth dying for, she said quietly, because I was never yours to begin with. You wanted a broodmare, a decoration, something to make you look strong, but I'm not that. I never was. Rix shifted back, standing naked and shaking with rage. You think you're better than me now because you found some lizard to warm your bed? I think I'm free, Kayla said, and that's more than I ever had with you. She turned her back on him, a deliberate insult, and walked back to Kalian's side. Rix lunged. Kayla felt it through the bond a split second before it happened. She spun, her hand coming up instinctively, and the fire inside her erupted. Flames poured from her palm, bright and blazing, slamming into Rix mid-leap. He screamed, hitting the ground and rolling to extinguish the flames. Kayla stared at her hand, shocked. The courtyard was silent. Rix lay on the ground, gasping, his skin blistered and smoking. He looked up at her, and for the first time there was fear in his eyes. You're not a wolf anymore, he whispered. No, Kayla agreed, her voice steady. I'm not. Kalion stepped forward, returning to his human form. He crouched beside Rix, his expression cold. You came here to reclaim something that was never yours. You failed. Now you have a choice. Leave and never come back, or stay, and I'll make sure you never threaten her again. Rick stared at him, then at Kayla, his face twisted with something between rage and despair. This isn't over, he rasped. Yes, Kalion said quietly. It is. He stood and gestured to the wolves. Take him. Get out of my territory. If I see any of you again, I won't be merciful. Garrett and Siv moved forward, hauling Rix to his feet. The other wolves followed, silent and shaken. Kayla watched them go, her heart pounding, her hand still tingling from the fire she'd unleashed. When they were gone, Kalion turned to her. You all right? Kayla nodded slowly. I think so. Mira approached, her expression unreadable. That was reckless. I know, but effective. Mira's mouth twitched into a smile. You're learning faster than I thought. Kalion placed a hand on Kayla's shoulder, and she felt the bond hum between them, warm and reassuring. Come on, he said. Let's go inside. Well, that night, Kayla couldn't sleep. She stood in the courtyard again, staring up at the stars, replaying the confrontation over and over in her mind. The look on Rix's face, the fear, the hatred, the fire she'd unleashed without even thinking. You're thinking too loud. She turned. Kalion stood in the archway, bare-chested, arms crossed. Can you actually hear my thoughts? Kayla asked. No, but I can feel when you're spiraling. He stepped into the courtyard, joining her under the stars. What's wrong? I almost killed him. You defended yourself. I know, but Kayla wrapped her arms around herself. I didn't even think. The fire just came. That's how it's supposed to work, Kalion said. Instinct. Survival. What if I can't control it? You will. With practice. He moved closer, his presence warm and grounding. You're not the same person who was thrown into the expanse. You're stronger now. You just have to accept that. Kayla looked up at him. What if I don't want to be strong? What if I just want to be safe? You can be both. Kalion reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Strength doesn't mean you can't rest. It just means you can protect yourself when you need to. Kayla leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. Thank you. For everything. You don't need to thank me. I do. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. You saved my life. More than once. Kalion's expression softened. You saved mine too. How? He smiled faintly. You reminded me what it's like to have something worth protecting. The bond between them flared, bright and warm, and Kayla felt something shift in her chest. Not just gratitude, not just relief, something deeper. Before she could second-guess herself, she rose on her toes and kissed him. Kalion went still for a heartbeat. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close, and he kissed her back with a fierce, burning intensity that stole her breath. The fire inside her roared to life, but this time it didn't hurt. It felt like belonging. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kalion rested his forehead against hers. Are you sure? He asked quietly. Kayla nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. And for the first time since she'd been cast into the wasteland, Kayla felt whole. 3 weeks later, Kayla woke to a sensation she didn't recognize. It wasn't pain, it wasn't the fire. It was something else, something new. She sat up slowly, her hand moving to her stomach. The bond with Kalion pulsed, warm and steady, but beneath it was another presence, tiny, fragile, but unmistakably there. Her breath caught. No, it wasn't possible. But even as she thought it, she knew it was true. She was pregnant. Kayla sat on the edge of the bed, her hand still pressed against her stomach, trying to process what her body was telling her. Pregnant. The word felt foreign, impossible. After 3 years of trying and failing with Rix, after being told she was broken, barren, useless, now this. Now, when she'd stopped hoping, stopped wanting it, the life inside her was undeniable. She felt it through the bond too. Kalion's presence stirred, sleep-heavy but sharpening as he sensed her distress. A moment later, he appeared in the doorway, hair disheveled, eyes still heavy-lidded. What's wrong? Kayla looked up at him, and the words stuck in her throat. Kellyanne crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling in front of her. Talk to me. I'm pregnant, she whispered. Kellyanne went very still. His eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, fear, anything that would suggest she was uncertain. You're sure? I can feel it. Them. Kayla's hand trembled against her stomach. There's 2. Kellyanne's breath caught. Twins. Kayla nodded, tears pricking at her eyes. I don't understand. Mira said it was possible, but I didn't expect. Hey, Kellyanne took her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. This is good. This is what you wanted. I know, but Kayla's voice broke. What if something goes wrong? What if my body rejects them like it did before? What if it won't? Kellyanne's voice was firm, certain. Your fire is stable now. You're not fighting it anymore. And these aren't wolf children. They're ours. The possessiveness in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it grounded her. I'm terrified, she admitted. I know. Kellyanne pressed his forehead to hers. But you're not alone. Not this time. Kayla closed her eyes, letting his presence wash over her through the bond. Steady, unwavering, absolutely certain. We need to tell Mira, she said finally. Now? Now, Estelle. Mira took one look at Kayla and knew. Well, she said, setting down her tea. That didn't take long. Kayla flushed. Is it that obvious? To someone who knows what to look for? Yes. Mira gestured for them to sit. How far along? I don't know, a few weeks, maybe? Mira moved to stand in front of Kayla, pressing her hands to Kayla's abdomen. Heat flared between them, and Kayla felt the presence of the twins more clearly. 2 distinct sparks, small but burning bright. Mira's eyes widened. Oh, that's what? Kellyanne demanded. They're strong. Mira pulled her hands back, looking shaken. Stronger than they should be at this stage. I can feel their fire already. Kayla's heart sank. Is that bad? I don't know, Mira admitted. I've never seen anything like this. My mother's pregnancy was difficult, but she was carrying 1 child. You're carrying 2, and they're both radiating power like... She stopped, searching for words. Like they're already trying to be born. Kellyanne's jaw tightened. What does that mean for Kayla? It means this is going to be harder than a normal pregnancy. Much harder. Mira met Kayla's gaze. Your body is going to have to channel an enormous amount of fire to sustain them. If you can't keep up, if the balance shifts, they'll burn me out from the inside, Kayla finished quietly. Mira nodded. Kellyanne stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Kayla could feel his fury through the bond, tightly leashed but ready to explode. There has to be a way to stabilize it, he said. There is, Mira said, but it's going to require constant monitoring, daily sessions to help balance the fire. Rest. No stress, no what? Kayla asked. Mira hesitated. No threats. If someone comes after you again, if you have to fight, defend yourself, anything that spikes your adrenaline, it could destabilize the pregnancy. Kayla's stomach dropped. Rix. He won't come back, Kellyanne said flatly. I made sure of that. You humiliated him in front of his entire pack, Kayla countered. He's not going to just let that go. Then I'll kill him. Kellyanne, I mean it. Kellyanne turned to face her, his eyes blazing gold. If he threatens you or the children, I'll end him. Kayla wanted to argue, but the words died in her throat. Because deep down, she knew he was right. Rix wouldn't stop, not unless someone made him. Mira sighed. Let's focus on keeping Kayla alive first. We'll deal with vengeful ex-mates later. The first month was manageable. Kayla followed Mira's instructions to the letter. Daily sessions to balance her fire. Plenty of rest, no strenuous activity. The twins grew steadily, their presence in her mind becoming more distinct with each passing day. She could feel their fire now, 2 separate flames burning in tandem, feeding off her, but also feeding her in return. It was strange and beautiful and terrifying all at once. Kellyanne was relentless in his protectiveness. He barely left her side, hovering like a shadow, ready to catch her if she stumbled or incinerate anyone who looked at her wrong. You're going to drive me insane, Kayla said one afternoon as he helped her down the stairs for the 3rd time that day. Better insane than dead, Kalion replied. I'm not made of glass. No, you're carrying two dragon children who are trying to burn their way out of you. Forgive me for being cautious. Kayla opened her mouth to argue, then felt a sharp kick against her ribs. She gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. Kalion was there instantly. What is it? They're moving. Kayla pressed her hand harder, feeling another kick. They're really moving. Kalion placed his hand over hers, and his expression softened in a way she'd never seen before. They're strong. Too strong, Kayla muttered. I'm only 2 months along. They shouldn't be kicking like this yet. They're impatient, Kalion said, a hint of pride in his voice. Like their mother. Kayla laughed despite herself. But the laughter died when she felt another presence, cold and familiar, brush against the edge of her awareness. She froze. What? Kalion asked sharply. He's here, Kayla whispered. Kalion's entire demeanor changed. He straightened, his body going rigid, his eyes flashing gold. Where? I don't know. I can feel him. Watching. Kalion's hand moved to her back, guiding her quickly down the hall. Get to the inner chamber. Now. What are you going to do? Whatever I have to. Rix didn't come alone this time. When the alarm sounded, Kayla was already in the inner chamber, surrounded by Mira and 3 other dragons who'd been stationed as guards. She could hear the sounds of battle echoing through the mountain, roars, snarls, the crash of bodies against stone. How many? She asked Mira. Too many. Mira's face was grim. He brought reinforcements, other packs. This isn't just about you anymore. This is a statement. Kayla's hands clenched into fists. I have to do something. You have to stay here, Mira said firmly. If you go out there, you put the twins at risk. And if I stay here, Kalion could die. He won't. Mira's voice was certain. He's fought worse than a pack of desperate wolves. But Kayla could feel the bond straining, could sense Kalion's fury and the sharp spikes of pain when claws found flesh. He was strong, but he wasn't invincible. And neither were the dragons. She stood, ignoring Mira's protest. Kayla, I'm not going to fight, Kayla said, but I'm not going to hide either. She walked to the archway leading to the main hall, Mira close behind. The sounds of battle grew louder, snarling, roaring, the wet sound of claws tearing through flesh. When she stepped into the hall, the scene before her was chaos. Wolves and dragons clashed in a writhing mass of fur and scales. Blood stained the stone floor. Kalion was in the center, fully shifted, his massive form tearing through wolves like they were made of paper. But there were so many of them, and more kept coming. And then she saw Rix. He stood at the far end of the hall, flanked by 2 massive wolves Kayla didn't recognize. His eyes locked onto hers, and he smiled, cold and vicious. There she is, he called out, his voice cutting through the noise. The traitor! Kalion's head snapped toward her, and she felt his rage explode through the bond. He started toward her, but 3 wolves threw themselves at him, dragging him back into the fray. Rix stepped forward. You look different, Kayla. Almost healthy. Kayla's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, and Rix's eyes followed the motion. His expression twisted. No. Yes, Kayla said quietly. Rix's face went white, then red. You're pregnant, with his children. Twins, Kayla said, and she couldn't keep the defiance out of her voice. Something I could never give you. Rix let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a scream. You lying traitoress! I never lied to you, Kayla interrupted. I tried. For 3 years I tried. But my body knew what you refused to accept. I was never meant to be yours. Rix's hand shook. You were always mine, from the moment we bonded. That bond is dead, Kayla said. I killed it, and I'd do it again. Rix lunged. Kayla didn't move, because Kalion was already there. He hit Rix mid-leap, the impact so violent it cracked the stone floor. They went down in a tangle of scales and fur, claws and teeth. Kalion's jaws closed around Rix's throat, and for a moment Kayla thought it was over. But Rix twisted, slipping free, and his claws raked across Kalion's side. Blood poured from the wound, bright and hot. Kayla felt it through the bond, a sharp, stabbing pain that made her gasp. And then the twins responded. Heat surged through her, so sudden and intense it drove her to her knees. The fire inside her roared to life, and she felt the twins' presence flare, angry and protective. They felt their father's pain, and they didn't like it. Kayla's hands hit the ground, and fire erupted from her palms, spreading across the floor in a wave of searing heat. Wolves yelped and scattered, their fur singed. The entire hall went silent. Kayla looked up, her vision tinged with red, her entire body blazing with power that wasn't entirely her own. The twins were feeding her their fire, amplifying her own, turning her into something she'd never been before. A weapon. "Enough," she said, and her voice echoed like thunder. Rick stared at her, his eyes wide with something that looked like fear. Kalion shifted back to human form, blood streaming from the gash in his side, but his gaze never left Rick's. "You came here for her," Kalion said, his voice rough. "So here she is. Say what you came to say." Rick's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Kayla stood slowly, the fire still crackling around her. "You wanted me to be something I wasn't. A perfect Luna. A broodmare. A decoration to make you look strong. But I was never those things. And when you realized that, you threw me away." "You were broken," Rick said, but his voice wavered. "No," Kayla said. "I was incompatible. With you, with your pack, with everything you represented. My body knew it, even if my heart took longer to accept it." She stepped forward, and Rick's actually backed up. "I'm not broken," Kayla continued. "I'm not barren. I'm carrying 2 children right now, and they're strong and healthy and everything you said I could never have. Not because I changed, but because I finally found someone who could match me." Rick's face crumpled. "I loved you." "No," Kayla said quietly. "You loved what you thought I could be. You never loved who I actually was." The words hung in the air, final and irrevocable. Rick looked at her, then at Kalion, then at the dragons surrounding them. His shoulders sagged. "You win," he said hoarsely. "This was never about winning," Kayla said. "This was about survival. And I survived." Kalion stepped forward, his presence radiating controlled violence. "Leave. Now. And if you ever come back, I won't stop at exile." Rick met his gaze for a long moment. Then he shifted, turned, and walked out of the hall. The wolves followed, silent and defeated. When the last one disappeared, Kayla's legs gave out. Kalion caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her gently. "Easy. I've got you." "The twins are fine," Mira said, appearing at her side. She pressed her hands to Kayla's stomach, and the fire there settled, the twins' presence returning to normal. "They're fine, but you need to rest." Kayla nodded, too exhausted to argue. Kalion lifted her effortlessly, cradling her against his chest. "I'm taking her to our chamber." Mira didn't argue. As Kalion carried her through the halls, Kayla rested her head against his shoulder. "You're hurt. I'll heal." "Kalion, I'll heal," he repeated. "As long as you're safe, nothing else matters." Kayla closed her eyes, feeling the bond hum between them, and let herself believe him. 3 days later, word reached the mountain that Rick's had been overthrown. Kayla sat in the courtyard when Saris brought the news, her expression caught between amusement and satisfaction. "His pack challenged him," Saris reported. "Said he'd led them into a suicide mission. They stripped him of his title and cast him out. Last anyone saw, he was heading into the expanse." Kayla's chest tightened. "The wasteland? Fitting, isn't it?" Saris said. "He sent you there to die. Now he's walking the same path." Kayla should have felt vindicated. Instead, she just felt tired. "What happens now?" "Now?" Saris shrugged. "His pack has a new alpha, a woman named Kara. Smart, practical. She's already sent word that she wants to establish peaceful terms with us." Kalion, who'd been standing nearby, raised an eyebrow. "That's a first." "She's not an idiot," Saris said. "She saw what happened to Rick's. She doesn't want to repeat his mistakes." Kayla looked down at her hands, still faintly glowing with residual heat. "Do you think he'll survive out there?" "Does it matter?" Saris asked. "No," Kayla said quietly. "I suppose it doesn't." But that night, as she lay in bed with Kalion's arms around her, she thought about Rick's walking alone into the wasteland. The same wasteland where she'd nearly died. The same sun that had tried to burn her alive. And she wondered if he'd find what she'd found. Probably not. Because Rix had never been willing to change, to grow, to admit he was wrong. And the wasteland didn't forgive stubbornness. The pregnancy progressed, though not without difficulty. By the 4th month, Kayla's body was struggling to keep up with the twins' demands. She was constantly exhausted, her fire burning hotter and hotter as the children grew. Mira worked with her daily, helping her balance the heat, teaching her how to channel it without letting it consume her. "They're growing faster than they should," Mira said during one session, her hands pressed to Kayla's swollen belly. "At this rate, you won't make it to full term." "How much time do I have?" Kayla asked. 6 months, maybe 7, instead of 9. Kalian, who'd been pacing the room, stopped. "Is that safe?" "For dragon children, yes. For Kayla?" Mira hesitated. "I don't know. Her body is adapting, but it's being pushed to its limits." "Then we make sure she doesn't go beyond those limits," Kalian said firmly. Kayla wanted to argue, but another kick from one of the twins stole her breath. She pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the fire beneath her skin. "They're restless." "They're strong," Mira corrected. "Too strong. I've never felt power like this in unborn children." "Is that bad?" "It's unprecedented." Mira pulled her hands back. "Just be careful. And listen to your body. If something feels wrong, tell us immediately." Kayla nodded. That night she stood in the courtyard again, staring up at the stars. The twins were active, moving constantly, their fires flickering in tandem with hers. She could feel them now, not just their presence, but their personalities. One was fierce, aggressive, always pushing. The other was calmer, steadier, but no less strong. "They're going to be a handful," Kalion said, appearing beside her. Kayla laughed. "That's an understatement." Kalion's hand came to rest on her stomach, and the twins responded immediately, pressing against his palm. "They know me." "Of course they do. You're their father." Kalion's expression softened, and Kayla felt a wave of emotion through the bond. Pride, fear, love so fierce it almost hurt. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said quietly. "Or to them." "I know. I mean it, Kayla. Whatever it takes." Kayla turned to face him, placing her hand over his. "I'm not afraid. Not anymore." And she meant it. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. The 5th month brought visitors. Not wolves this time, but dragons. They came from the outer peaks, drawn by rumors of Kylion's bonded mate, a wolf carrying dragon children. Some came out of curiosity. Others came to see if it was true. And a few came to challenge it. "She's an outsider," one of them said, a male with silver scales and cold eyes. His name was Torvon, and he'd made his displeasure clear from the moment he arrived. "She doesn't belong here." "She's my mate," Kalian said flatly. "That makes her one of us." "By what law?" "By mine." Torvin's eyes narrowed. "You're king of these peaks, Kalion. Not of all dragons. You can't just decide—" "I can decide whatever I want in my own territory," Kalion interrupted. "And I've decided she stays. If you have a problem with that, you're welcome to leave." Torvin's jaw tightened. "And if I challenge your decision?" The temperature in the hall dropped. Kalion stepped forward, and the air around him began to shimmer with heat. "Then you'll lose." Torvon held his gaze for a long moment, then looked away. "Fine. But don't expect everyone to accept this as easily as I have." He left, and Kayla let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "That went well," she said dryly. Kalion's mouth twitched. Could have been worse. But the encounter left Kayla uneasy. She could feel the tension in the mountain, the whispers that followed her wherever she went. Some dragons accepted her, others tolerated her. But a few, like Torvon, saw her as a threat, and she had no idea how to change their minds. The answer came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks after Torvon's visit, Kara, the new alpha of Rix's former pack, arrived at the mountain. She came alone, unarmed, and asked to speak with Kayla. "Why?" Kayla asked when Kalian brought her the message. "She didn't say, just that it was important." Kayla considered refusing, but curiosity won out. "All right, but you're staying with me." Obviously. They met Kara in the main hall. She was younger than Kayla expected, maybe 30, with dark hair braided down her back and sharp, intelligent eyes. She bowed respectfully when she saw Kalion, then turned to Kayla. "Thank you for seeing me," Kara said. "What do you want?" Kayla asked, not unkindly. "To apologize." Kara's gaze was steady. "For what Rix did to you. For what we all allowed to happen." Kayla blinked, caught off guard. "You weren't Alpha then?" "No, but I was part of the pack. I stood by and did nothing while he cast you out. That makes me complicit." Kara took a breath. "I'm here to make amends and to ask for your help." "My help?" "The pack is fracturing," Kara admitted. "Rix's exile left a void. Some want to follow his path, violence, conquest, dominance. Others want peace. But they're all watching to see what happens next. And they're watching you." "Why me?" "Because you survived what should have killed you. Because you bonded with a dragon king. Because you're carrying children that shouldn't be possible." Kara stepped closer. "You're proof that we don't have to be what we've always been. That we can change, adapt, grow." Kayla stared at her, her mind racing. "What are you asking?" "Stand with me," Kara said. "Show them that strength doesn't have to come from cruelty. That we can coexist with the dragons. That there's another way." Kayla looked at Leon, who was watching the exchange with an unreadable expression. "It's your choice," he said through the bond. Kayla turned back to Kara. "If I do this, it won't change overnight. There will be resistance, backlash." "I know. And I won't compromise who I am to make them comfortable." Kara smiled faintly. "I wouldn't ask you to." Kayla considered for a long moment. Then she held out her hand. "All right, let's try." Kara took it, and the deal was sealed. Boop. News of the alliance spread quickly. Within weeks, other packs began reaching out, cautiously at first, then with growing interest. Some wanted trade agreements, others wanted protection. A few even asked about the possibility of bonds between wolves and dragons. It was slow, messy, and fraught with tension, but it was progress. And for the first time, Kayla felt like she was building something instead of just surviving. The twins continued to grow, their presence a constant reminder of what was at stake. Kayla's body ached constantly now, her fire burning so hot that even Kalion had to be careful when he touched her. But she endured, because she'd survived the expanse. She'd survived rejection, exile, and a forced bond. She could survive this too. One evening, as she stood in the courtyard watching the sunset, Mira approached. "You're glowing," Mira said. Kayla looked down at her hands. She was literally, her skin radiated a faint golden light. "Is that normal? For you?" "Yes." Mira smiled. "The twins are feeding off your fire, but they're also giving it back. You're stronger now than you've ever been." "I don't feel strong," Kayla admitted. "I feel like I'm barely holding on." "That's because you're carrying the weight of two lives that are almost as powerful as you are." Mira placed a hand on her shoulder. "But you're doing it. That's what matters." Kayla nodded, her hand moving to her stomach. She felt the twins shift, restless and eager. They were ready to be born. And so, she realized, was she. The contraction started 3 weeks earlier than Mira had predicted. Kayla woke in the middle of the night, gasping, her entire body seized by a pain so intense it drove the air from her lungs. The fire inside her surged, wild and uncontrolled, and she felt the twins thrashing, their presence suddenly overwhelming. "Kalion," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. He was awake instantly, the bond flaring with alarm. "What is it?" "They're coming." Kalion was out of bed before she could finish the sentence, already moving toward the door. "Mira! Get Mira now!" Saris appeared first, her eyes wide. "What's happening?" "The babies," Kalion said tersely. "Get Mira. Get everyone who knows anything about childbirth. Move." Saris vanished. Kayla tried to sit up, but another contraction hit, worse than the first. She cried out, her hands clutching at the sheets. The fire inside her was out of control, burning hotter than it ever had. She could feel the twins fighting, their power colliding with hers, feeding off each other in a feedback loop that was tearing her apart from the inside. "Breathe," Kalion said, kneeling beside her. His hands found hers, and she gripped them hard enough to bruise. "Just breathe." "They're too strong," Kayla gasped. I can't hold them." "Yes, you can." Kalion's voice was fierce. "You've survived worse than this. You survived the expanse. You survived Rix. You can survive this. Mira burst into the room, followed by two other women Kayla vaguely recognized. They moved with practiced efficiency, assessing the situation in seconds. How far apart are the contractions? Mira demanded. 2 minutes, Kalian said. Mira cursed. That's too fast. She's not ready. Tell that to them, Kayla ground out. Mira pressed her hands to Kayla's stomach, and her expression darkened. They're burning too hot. If we don't stabilize the fire, they'll consume her before they're born. Then stabilize it, Kalian snapped. I'm trying. Mira's hands glowed with amber light as she poured her own fire into Kayla, trying to create a balance. But the twins resisted, their power pushing back. They don't want to be contained. They want out. Another contraction ripped through Kayla, and this time she screamed. The sound echoed through the mountain, raw and primal. Kalion's grip on her hand tightened, and she felt his desperation through the bond. What do we do? Mira's jaw set. We let them come, and we pray she's strong enough to survive it. The hours that followed blurred into a nightmare of pain and fire. Kayla lost track of time. All she knew was the endless cycle of contractions, each one worse than the last, each one bringing the twins closer while simultaneously threatening to tear her apart. The fire inside her raged out of control, and no matter how much Mira tried to balance it, the twins' power kept overwhelming hers. I can't do this, Kayla gasped at one point, her voice breaking. I can't. Yes, you can, Kalian said, his face inches from hers. Look at me, Kayla. Look at me. She forced her eyes open, meeting his gaze. You are the strongest person I've ever met, Kalian said, and his voice shook with an emotion she'd never heard from him before. You survived being thrown away like garbage. You survived the wasteland. You severed a bond and built a new one. You fought off an entire pack. You are not going to die giving birth. They're too powerful, Kayla whispered. They're going to kill me. No. Kalian's hands framed her face, forcing her to hold his gaze. They're yours. You gave them life. You fed them your fire. They're not going to destroy you. They're going to make you stronger. Kayla wanted to believe him, but another contraction hit and the world dissolved into white-hot agony. She felt herself slipping, the edges of her consciousness fraying. The fire was everywhere now, inside and outside, consuming everything. She could barely tell where she ended and the twins began. And then, somewhere in the chaos, she heard a voice. Not Kalian's, not Myra's. Something smaller, younger, Mother. Kayla's eyes flew open. The twins. She could hear them, not with her ears, but through the fire, through the bond that connected them. They were calling to her, reaching for her, trying to find their way. We need you, the voice said. Don't leave us. Something shifted inside Kayla. The fire that had been tearing her apart suddenly had direction, purpose. Instead of fighting it, she reached for it, pulling it into herself and channeling it outward, toward the twins, toward birth. That's it, Mira said, her voice sharp with relief. She's doing it. She's controlling it. Kayla barely heard her. All her focus was on the twins, on guiding them, on using the fire to help instead of hinder. It was excruciating, but it was also right. Like the fire had finally found what it was meant for. Push, Mira commanded. Now, Kayla, push. Kayla pushed, and the first twin was born in a blaze of light. The baby's cry was unlike anything Kayla had ever heard, high and fierce, with an edge of heat that made the air shimmer. It's a girl, Mira said, her voice filled with awe. She held the infant carefully, wrapping her in a thick blanket. Even from across the room, Kayla could see the faint glow beneath the baby's skin, the ember-like gleam in her eyes. Let me see her, Kayla gasped. Mira brought the baby over, placing her carefully in Kayla's arms. The moment Kayla touched her daughter, the fire between them harmonized, settling into a steady pulse. The baby stared up at her with eyes that were already turning gold, and Kayla felt tears streak down her face. She's perfect, Kayla whispered. She's powerful, Mira corrected, but there was a smile in her voice. I've never felt fire like this in a newborn. Kalian knelt beside the bed, his hand hovering over the baby as if he was afraid to touch her. Can I? She's your daughter, Kayla said softly. Of course you can. Kalion carefully took the baby, cradling her against his chest. The infant made a small sound, her tiny hand curling around his finger. Kalion's expression cracked, and for a moment Kayla saw him completely unguarded, vulnerable and awed and terrified all at once. "Hello," he said quietly. "I'm your father." The baby gurgled, and a small puff of smoke escaped her mouth. Kalion laughed, a raw, disbelieving sound. But Kayla didn't have time to enjoy the moment. Another contraction seized her, and she gasped. "The second one," Mira said, immediately back at her side. "Ready?" Kayla nodded, gritting her teeth. The second birth was faster, but no less intense. This twin fought harder, resisting even as Kayla tried to guide them. The fire flared dangerously high, and for a moment Kayla thought she might lose consciousness. But then she felt Kalion's hand on her shoulder, his presence anchoring her through the bond. "You've got this," he said. Kayla pushed one more time, and the second twin was born. This one's cry was deeper, angrier, and the temperature in the room spiked so sharply that one of the assistants yelped. "It's a boy," Mira announced, wrapping him quickly. "And he is not happy about being born." She brought him to Kayla, who took him with shaking hands. He was larger than his sister, his features already more defined, and when he opened his eyes, they blazed pure molten gold. "He's got your temper," Kayla said, looking at Kalion. Kalion moved closer, still holding their daughter. "And your stubbornness." The boy's cries quieted the moment Kayla held him against her chest, his fire settling in response to hers. She looked down at both of her children, her daughter calm and watchful, her son fierce and protective, and felt something inside her shift. She'd spent 3 years believing she was broken, and now she was holding proof that she never had been. "They're beautiful," Mira said softly. Kayla looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for everything." Mira's eyes glistened. "You did this. Not me. You fought for them." "We both did," Kayla said, glancing at Kalion. He sat beside her on the bed, their daughter still cradled in his arms, and pressed a kiss to Kayla's temple. "You were incredible." Kayla leaned into him, exhausted but whole. "We have to name them." Kalion looked down at their daughter. "Empress," he said after a moment, "for the first ember of a new fire." Kayla smiled. "And him?" She looked at their son. "Kale," Kalion said. "After his mother." Kayla's breath caught. "You don't have to." "I want to." Kalion's voice was firm. "He's named for the woman who refused to break, who survived what should have killed her, who changed everything." Kayla closed her eyes, overwhelmed. They sat there together, a family now, forged in fire and pain and love, and for the first time in her life, Kayla felt complete. The news of the twins' birth spread through the mountain like wildfire. Dragons came from all over the peaks to see them, curious and cautious. Some brought gifts, woven blankets, carved toys, vials of precious oils. Others simply came to witness, to see if the rumors were true, that a wolf had borne dragon children, that the impossible had become real. Kara arrived 3 days after the birth, accompanied by a small delegation of wolves. She'd sent word ahead, asking permission to visit, and Kayla had agreed. When Kara saw the twins, her expression shifted through several emotions: shock, awe, and something that looked like hope. "They're real," Kara said softly. "Very real," Kayla said, adjusting Empress in her arms. "And very loud," Kara laughed. "May I?" Kayla hesitated, then nodded. She carefully transferred Empress to Kara's arms, watching closely. Kara held the baby with surprising gentleness, her eyes soft. "She's beautiful. They both are." Kael, asleep in a basket beside the bed, chose that moment to wake up and immediately start crying. Kalion scooped him up, murmuring low reassurances until the baby settled. "This changes everything," Kara said, still staring at Empress. "If they can exist, if they can thrive, then maybe—" She stopped, her throat working. "Maybe there's hope for the rest of us," Kayla finished. Kara nodded. "Some of my wolves have already asked about the possibility of—" She gestured vaguely. "Bonding with dragons?" Kalion asked. "Yes." Kalion's expression was unreadable. "It's not something that can be forced. The fire has to match. But if it does, he looked at Kayla, then yes, it's possible. Kara handed Empress back to Kayla carefully. Thank you for proving it could be done. I didn't do it to prove anything, Kayla said. I did it to survive. And that's exactly why it matters, Kara said. Over the following weeks, Kayla adjusted to her new reality. Motherhood was harder than she'd expected. Empress was relatively easy, calm, curious, content to watch the world with those gold-flecked eyes. But Kyle was demanding, restless, burning through energy faster than Kyla could keep up with. He cried when he was hungry, cried when he was tired, and cried when he simply wanted attention. He's going to be a handful, Mira said one afternoon, watching as Kayla tried to soothe him. That's an understatement, Kayla muttered. But despite the exhaustion, despite the constant demands, Kayla had never been happier. She watched Empress discover her hands, watched Kale's first attempt at rolling over, watched them both respond to Kaelion's voice with immediate recognition. Every small milestone felt like a victory. And slowly, the mountain adjusted. The dragons who'd been skeptical at first began to soften. They saw how Kaelion doted on his children, how fiercely he protected Kayla. They saw the twins grow stronger every day, their fires bright and stable, and they began to accept that maybe, just maybe, change wasn't something to fear. Torvon returned 2 months after the birth, his expression guarded. I was wrong, he said bluntly when he found Kayla in the courtyard. Empress was strapped to her chest in a sling, dozing peacefully. About you. About them. Kayla raised an eyebrow. What changed your mind? I saw your daughter breathe fire yesterday, Torvon said. She's 2 months old and already showing more control than some yearlings. That's not wolf blood. That's pure dragon. She's both, Kayla corrected, and so is her brother. They're proof that we don't have to be one or the other. We can be something new. Torvon studied her for a long moment. Then he inclined his head. You have my respect, Luna. It was the first time anyone had called her that since the day Rix cast her out. Kayla felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. Thank you. 6 months after the twins were born, Rix returned. Kayla was in the lower halls with Mira when the alarm sounded. Her heart jumped into her throat, and she immediately reached for the bond, finding Kaelion already moving. Stay here, Mira said. Not a chance. She handed Empress to one of the attendants and ran toward the main hall, Mira close behind. When she arrived, she found Kaelion standing at the entrance, blocking the way. And beyond him, framed in the archway, was Rix, except he barely looked like himself anymore. His hair was matted and filthy, his clothes torn and stained. He'd lost weight, his face gaunt and shadowed, but worst of all were his eyes, empty and hollow, stripped of the arrogance and fury that had once defined him. Kayla, he said, and his voice cracked. Kaelion didn't move. You have 10 seconds to turn around and leave. Please, Rick said, ignoring him. I just want to talk to her. You lost that right, Kaelion said coldly, when you threw her into the expanse to die. I know. Rix's shoulders sagged. I know what I did. I know I can't take it back. But I need to see her. Just once. Kayla stepped forward, placing a hand on Kaelion's arm. Let him speak. Kaelion's jaw tightened, but he moved aside. Kayla walked past him, stopping a few feet from Rix. Up close, he looked even worse. Broken, defeated, a shadow of the man who'd once ruled a pack. What do you want? She asked quietly. To apologize, Rix said. For everything, for not seeing what you were, for throwing you away, for trying to force you back. He swallowed hard. You were right. About all of it. Kayla crossed her arms. And I don't expect forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I needed you to know that I understand now. What I lost, what I destroyed. His voice broke. You were never the problem. I was. Kayla stared at him, waiting for the anger, the vindication, the satisfaction. But all she felt was tired. I forgave you a long time ago, she said finally, not because you deserved it, but because holding on to that anger was killing me. So yes, Rix, I forgive you, but that doesn't mean I want you in my life. Rix nodded slowly. I understand. He turned to leave, then stopped. I heard about the children. Congratulations. Kayla's throat tightened. Thank you. Rix looked back at her one last time, and she saw something in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or loss. Then he walked away, disappearing into the mountain path. Kalion moved to her side. Are you all right? Kayla nodded. I am. And she meant it, because Rix's approval didn't matter anymore. His regret didn't change what he'd done, but seeing him broken and lost, walking the same path she'd once walked, brought a kind of closure she hadn't known she needed. She'd survived, and he hadn't. That was enough. Chasang. 3 years later, the mountain was unrecognizable. The alliance between wolves and dragons had grown, spreading to other packs, other territories. Trade routes had been established. Bonds had been formed. Not many, but enough to prove it was possible. And at the center of it all was Kayla, the wolf who'd refused to die. She stood in the courtyard now, watching as Empress and Kael chased each other around the stone pillars. Empress moved with grace, her scales, yes, scales, faint and shimmering along her arms, catching the light. Kael was faster, more aggressive, his fire already strong enough to singe the ground when he lost his temper. They're getting faster, Kalion said, appearing beside her. And louder, Kayla said with a laugh. Kalion wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. Any regrets? Kayla looked up at him, then back at their children. Not a single one. Good. Kalion pressed a kiss to her temple. Because I'm thinking about more. Kayla's eyes widened. More children? Why not? We're good at it. Kayla laughed, swatting his chest. Ask me again in 5 years. Kalion grinned, and the bond between them hummed with warmth and love, and a future that stretched out bright and endless. Empress shrieked with laughter as Kael caught her, both of them tumbling to the ground in a tangle of limbs and wings. They were chaos and fire, and everything Kayla had never thought she'd have. And watching them, she realized something. She wasn't broken. She never had been. She'd just been waiting for a world strong enough to deserve her. And now, finally, she'd built it. Years later, when people told stories about the Luna who survived the expanse, they always ended the same way. Not with her exile, not with her suffering, but with her rising. Because Kayla Thorne didn't just survive, she thrived, and the children she bore, the twins who carried fire in their veins and strength in their hearts, became the first of a new generation. Proof that change was possible, that the old ways didn't have to define the future, that sometimes the broken pieces were just waiting to be put back together in a new shape. Kayla stood on the highest peak of the mountain one evening, the wind whipping through her hair, the sun setting in a blaze of red and gold. Behind her, the mountain thrummed with life. Dragons and wolves, adults and children, all coexisting in a peace that had once seemed impossible. Kalion joined her, slipping his hand into hers. What are you thinking? He asked. Kayla smiled. That I used to think my story ended in the wasteland, that being cast out was the worst thing that could happen to me. And now? Now I know it was just the beginning. She turned to face him, the fire inside her burning steady and strong. I was never barren, she said. I was just waiting for something worth creating. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of fire, Kayla Thorne, once discarded, once broken, now whole, knew that she'd finally found where she belonged. Not in the pack that rejected her, not in the title they stripped away, but here, in the fire, in the family she'd built, in the future she'd claimed. She was never meant to be their Luna. She was meant to be something far greater, and she was.